Welcome to Forward 2025, the Guidon's flagship election coverage of the 2025 national midterm elections, where we sit down with senatorial candidates to discuss their vision and plans of action for the next 6 years. We thank everyone who is tuning in via our digital platforms. The other series of interviews of other senatorial candidates will be posted on the Guidon's Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to use the hashtags #Forward2025 and #Blueprint2025 when posting about the interviews on your social media pages. I am Dani Agustin, your host for today's interview.
Forward 2025 is an issues-based interview series for senatorial candidates running in the 2025 Philippine national midterm elections. 6 candidates included in Ateneo's 12 preferred senators discuss their platforms and answer important questions from the event's foremost demographic, the youth. The interview format consists of 5 rounds. Each round starts with an introduction of the agenda. The Guidon has identified 5 key areas inspired by the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals: poverty and social inclusion, health and well-being, environmental sustainability, economic growth and infrastructure, and governance and partnerships. After the agenda is introduced, the candidate will be asked to answer moderated, curated questions to elaborate and substantiate their plans of action for each of the specific agendas. This event is co-presented by our media partner, Rappler.
Today, we will be talking to lawyer and labor leader Luke Espiritu. He is the president of the Bukluran ng Manggagawang Pilipino. Good day, Luke, and thank you for being with us today.
Good day, Danya, and to the Ateneo community.
Thank you for that. So now we can proceed with the first round. So the topic of the category is poverty and social inclusion. So how will you incorporate poverty solutions and social inclusion into your campaign platforms?
Well, it is already incorporated. My platform would be I have a political agenda and a social justice agenda. So the social justice agenda is already it will already address the problem of poverty. We are for wages na nakabubuhay. We are against contractualization. We want to abolish contractualization. And we want support for the farmers, land reform, support for the MSMEs, and support para sa ating mga mangingisda. All of these things are also geared towards poverty reduction.
So since you've mentioned your plans for poverty, let's delve deeper into it. Despite helping eradicate a small index of poverty in the country, implementing the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program, or 4Ps, has raised concerns about long-term dependence by families. In its latest data, the Commission on Audit, or COA, has reported that 90% of the beneficiaries still remain poor. So how do you plan to ensure that beneficiaries transition from financial aid to sustainable livelihoods?
Siyempre, pang-mitigate lang naman talaga yan eh. And poor people really need mitigation sa poverty nila. Okay naman yan na we give yung mga talagang unfortunate ng pera ng taong bayan para pang suporta kasi hindi naman talaga nakabubuhay ang sahod. But of course, that doesn't mean that we don't adopt some systemic approaches. Like, kailangan natin ng livable wages. Ang wages natin sa Pilipinas ay below the poverty threshold. So, hindi ka talaga magtataka kung bakit maraming may hirap ngayon kasi kahit manggagawa nga, hindi nila kayang buhayin ang kanilang sarili. So, aside from giving yung 4Ps, kailangan solusyonan talaga mga root causes ng ating kahirapan. So, kailangan natin ng, as I told you, a package of social justice na nakatuon doon sa systemic na roots ng ating poverty. Low wages, contractualization, poverty in the countryside, ang ating mga magsasaka pinapabayaan, poverty ng mga mangingisda, yung ating ekonomiya na hindi nakabase sa production. Our economy is actually a rentier type of an economy. So kung gusto natin talagang ma-reduce ang poverty, kailangan natin ng mga social justice agenda na ito and geared towards creating an economy that is based on production. For example, if we want to support the farmers, dapat sila ay may access sa lupa, dapat may totoong land reform At ang gobyerno natin dapat sinusuportahan ng mga magsasaka, binibigyan ng subsidy. And when you do that, you actually create a productive type of an economy. We allow the farmers to produce our food. Then we solve our problem with yung prices ng ating pagkain. So it is really tied to the fact that we want an economy that is based on production, which will reduce poverty in a systemic way.
So aside from your plans on the wages and also agriculture, there is also the issue of unequal access to quality education. So the Philippines is currently in the midst of an educational crisis that actually worsened during the COVID-19 pandemic and has yet to recover. Education policies have geared towards improving access, so this means more classrooms, chairs, facilities, and equipment, but recent results from the program of international assessment shows that the quality of education is also a consistent shortcoming in our education system. So with that, how can you strike a balance between expanding access to education in our communities and ensuring that its quality is not compromised?
3 things, okay? Una, budget. Below the standard ang budget natin for education. The global standard should be 6% of the GDP. Then we have to comply with that. And we have to comply also with our constitutional provision which states na ang education must be given the highest budgetary priority. So kapag kulang ang budget, di kulang din talagang paggastos mo sa classroom. Kulang ang iyong panggastos sa state universities and colleges. So therefore, kailangan yung totoong budget na based sa global standard at based sa provision ng Constitution. Number 2, kailangan natin ng isang edukasyon na hindi tulad ng emphasis ng K-12. Kailangan natin reformahin yung K-12 niyan. Ang K-12 will simply try to train yung mga estudyante para maging productive sa kapitalistang ekonomiya. Gumagawa siya ng mga future workers. Education should be geared towards full human development. Dapat ang mga estudyante ay hindi lang binibigyan ng spesyalisasyon. Halimbawa, kailangan natin ng mga vocational na mga jobs, magbubuhos sila dun sa pagtitrain ng vocational, tapos to the exclusion of all other aspects ng human being. Na ang human being pwede rin naman maging artist, pwede rin naman maging manual laborer, pwede rin naman maging scientist. Kailangan yung ganong klaseng aspects ng tao ay kailangan mapunuan. That means we will have to train our students para magkaroon ng kapasidad on their own, na magkaroon ng creativity, critical thinking, so that on their own they can specialize on anything. And then number 3, ang ating medium of instruction. Kaya medyo mahina tayo sa comprehension, reading comprehension, kasi ang instruction natin ay bilingual. We must use our native tongue as medium of instruction.
We will now move on to questions related to health and well-being. That being said, how will you advocate for the health and well-being of Filipinos in your campaign promises?
Siyempre, kailangan natin na talagang maging compliant tayo sa mandate ng Universal Healthcare Law. Meaning to say, ang bawat Pilipino dapat hindi maging dahilan ang poverty niya para hindi siya maka-access ng healthcare. Meaning to say also na yung out-of-pocket expenses dapat ma-reduce. Like right now, 40% ang out-of-pocket expenses para sa iyong healthcare. Ang iba dyan ay pinaghahatian ng mga PhilHealth at kung ano-ano pang sources kung saan mapupunuan ng health needs ng mga Pilipino. Ang kailangan natin ay budget para sa mga institutions that will cater to public health. Alisin yung mga discretionary funds tungkol sa health na napupunta sa kamay ng mga kongresista at mga senador at mga politiko. Yung tinatawag nating MAIPIP, for example, medical pork barrel yan. Imbis na dyan ay ilagay sa kamay ng mga politiko para magiging pork barrel, para kunwari sila yung nagbibigay ng ayuda doon sa mga nagkakasakit, bakit hindi yan ilagay sa mga ahensya, sa mga institution, kung saan ito ay hindi magagamit sa politika at ma-access bilang right, bilang karapatan. Alisin yung mga confidential funds na yan, ilagay sa healthcare. Then if we harness yung ating mga public funds, na maalis natin yung mga discretionary funds, yung mga confidential funds, then we could actually comply with the mandate of the Universal Healthcare Law. Dapat, syempre, alam niyo naman, ako'y opposed din dun sa ginagawa ng ating gobyerno na yung pera ng PhilHealth ay ninanakaw. I would say ninanakaw. The 90 billion na binalik sa national government, tapos yan ngayon ang nagpa-fund ng mga AKAP. Again, mga pera na dinidistribute ng mga trapo natin para manatili sila sa pwesto. At syempre yung subsidy ng PhilHealth na 70 billion na hindi binigay. Dapat yan ay ibigay.
Since you've mentioned issues on budget in public healthcare, so public healthcare in the Philippines faces persistent challenges such as underfunding, lack of facilities, and a shortage of healthcare workers. So this problem becomes more apparent in rural areas that have little to no access to proper healthcare infrastructures. According to a study from the University of the Philippines, only 4 out of 17 regions have met the minimum set standards of hospital beds per 1,000 residents. What concrete steps will you take to improve healthcare access and quality for all Filipinos?
Kailangan natin ng sistema ng healthcare na nagsisimula sa komunidad, bawat komunidad. Dapat nga natin maraming mga doktor sa ating mga community. Dapat maraming mga doctors to the barrios na kino-compensate din natin. Dapat maraming mga healthcare professionals bukod pa sa doktor. Kailangan natin ng mga barangay healthcare workers na hindi naman natin pinaapi at ino-oppress at binibigyan ng barya. Kailangan yan i-employ ng gobyerno kasi mga frontliner sa health yan. Gawing regular, hindi yung parang tinatratong volunteers. Yan yung mga frontliners sa ating healthcare. Parang health system sa Cuba, wherein more ang emphasis nila sa pagpiprevent na magkasakit ka. Kasi ang mga healthcare workers, ang mga doktor, ang mga nurse, ang mga barangay healthcare workers ay nandun nakaagapay na sa'yo. Minomonitor ang health mo. Kung ano yung kailangan mong vitamina, kung anong kailangan mong gamot, ay ibibigay na nila right down to the household level para ma-prevent natin ang paglala ng sakit. In the long run, mas makakatipid tayo doon. Mas makakatipid tayo kapag medyo proactive tayong nangangalaga ng kalusugan kaysa sa reactive. Yung tipong pagka medyo malala ng sakit, saka natin dadalhin sa ospital. And then, kapag yung mga mami-minimize natin ang pressure doon sa ating mga hospital sa curative na pag-address ng ating mga sakit na nadadapo sa ating mga kababayan. So, kailangan ng preventive approach, kailangan ng community-level healthcare, kailangan ng gastusan ng gobyerno, ang mga sweldo ng mga barangay health workers, mga nurses, at saka mga doktor.
Thank you for elaborating your plan for Filipinos to have equal access to quality healthcare. So, on the other hand, for over 20 years, Congress has yet to pass the Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity Expression or SOGI bill. This is a bill that, if enacted into law, would vow to protect the rights of women and the LGBTQ plus Filipinos against gender and sexuality-based discrimination. Beyond advocating for the SOGI bill's passage, what other policy initiatives might you pursue to protect the nation's women and gender minorities from systemic discrimination?
Umaabot na nga ako sa same-sex marriage. Hindi lang yung mga non-discriminatory laws. Umaabot na ako na ang relasyon ng sa same-sex relationships. Kailangan basbasan ng batas yan bilang valid. Because ang relasyon ng mga same-sex couples, yan ay mga tunay na mga relasyon. Hindi naman yan guni-guni, yan ay realidad and may pag-ibig, may pagmamahal na nangyayari sa pag-iibigan ng mga same-sex couples na minsan nga mas healthy pa ang relationship nila kaysa sa heterosexual relationships. So aside from the SOGI bill, ako ay para sa same-sex marriage. And also, added to that is magkaroon ng property relations, magpa-partner ng mga LGBTQ+. And of course, kasama ang women dyan, di syempre gusto rin natin maipasa ang divorce law. Kailangan kapag hindi na nag-work ang marriage, whether same-sex or whether heterosexual marriage, kailangan natin kilalanin ng batas na dapat nang isevere ang marital tie.
Now we can move on to our third round where the category is environmental sustainability. How will you push for environmental sustainability in your campaign platforms?
Well, unang-una na dyan, kailangan natin kilalanin na nasa climate emergency na tayo. Ang problema dyan, para tayong nasa ilusyon na wala pa. Klaro naman yung mga sinasabi ng mga scientists that if we do not reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to such a level na ang pag-iinit ng ating planeta ay malimit sa 1.5 degrees by 2030, everything will be irreversible. And in order to limit our greenhouse gas emissions, we must actually reduce yung ating pag-rely sa fossil fuel. I-reduce natin ang reliance natin sa coal, sa liquefied natural gas, sa oil, in order to produce our energy needs. Kailangan natin mag-transition from fossil fuel towards renewable energy. And when I talk about renewable energy, ang ibig kong sabihin dyan ay wind at saka solar. Hindi nuclear, hindi yan renewable energy. So, there is already a study na the Philippines can do it. It is a viable option. Well, sinasabi nila, ang Pilipinas naman ay maliit ang contribution sa greenhouse gas emissions. So what, regardless of that, ang Pilipinas ay may chance dahil hindi siya highly industrialized na bansa, and we must also industrialize our country. May chance siya, may opportunity siya kasi magsisimula siya from scratch. So therefore, if we want to develop our economy, we have to develop a green economy. We have a clean slate in order to do that. But the most important thing is we must really reduce or alisin na yung reliance, 'di ba? Alisin na yung reliance sa coal at saka sa liquefied natural gas and all fossil fuel.
Since you've mentioned your plans for renewable energy, another issue that the country is currently facing is the issue of climate change. So climate change in rural and coastal communities, particularly the agricultural and fisheries sector, are on the front lines of experiencing climate change's onset effects, such as intense droughts and rising sea levels. Efforts to reduce the effects of such disasters are spearheaded mostly by government resiliency programs, often pursued without direct assistance or participation from community members themselves. How will you ensure that these communities are not only resilient in the face of future, most likely harsher disasters, but also actively included in the process?
Yan ay nasa area ng tinatawag nating climate adaptation. Yung we deal with extreme weather events brought about by climate change or climate emergency. Ang kailangan natin sa climate mitigation ay isang komprehensibong plano in order to do that. And of course, it needs also the participation of the affected communities. Ang ating gobyerno kasi, simpleng pagka merong kalamidad at nagkaroon ng epekto yan, ang response niya lang talaga ay magbibigay ng ayuda, kumuha ng contribution sa mga iba't ibang mga donors, tapos mamimigay ng mga bigas. It's as if ganun lang ang problema. Alam mo, yung bagyo sa atin, we could pretty much expect na ito ay magiging regular. Regular ang flooding, regular ang drought, regular ang mga landslide, regular na mangyayari yan. So, a comprehensive climate adaptation plan must be in place. And this comprehensive climate adaptation plan must be done in a systemic way. Hindi lang tayo magre-rely sa mga ayu-ayuda tuwing bagyo, kundi every time na merong extreme weather events, ito ay mga steps na ginagawa mo na on a regular basis, dahil regular din ang mga bagyo, with the participation of the affected communities.
With the issue you brought up with flooding and the bagyo, there are also actually issues concerning the bodies of water within the Philippine territory. So, the West Philippine Sea has been at the center of clashing territorial claims, but environmental experts have also called attention to the sustainability issues and ocean changes in the West Philippine Sea caused by climate change. What policies do you have that might address the environmental concerns regarding the West Philippine Sea, and how might they contribute to our continued efforts to assert our territorial sovereignty?
Well, pagdating sa West Philippine Sea, ang problema ang issue ng environment, it's really based on yung pag-init, no? Kasi pag uminit ang ating planeta, pag inabot natin yung close to 1.5 degrees na pag-init, masisira yung mga coral reefs natin. Tapos hindi na tayo magkakaroon ng kapasidad na mag-harvest ng bounty from the sea. So importante, hindi siya hiwalay doon sa fact na kailangan natin ang efforts natin na we would have to keep within the 1.5 limit, which is the scientific limit, para hindi magkaroon ng pag-init doon sa mga karagatan. And at the same time, siguro kailangan nating i-ensure na mga activities dyan sa West Philippine Sea ay hindi makakasira sa mga natural habitat ng ating mga isda. Syempre, pagka nandyan tayo, nasa atin ang parang sovereign rights over that because it is part of our exclusive economic zone. Dapat hindi natin i-overexploit ang marine wealth dyan sa West Philippine Sea in order for us to preserve the natural habitat ng ating mga isda, ng ating mga karagatan.
Now we are on our fourth round where the category is economic growth and infrastructure. Where does economic growth and development stand in your campaign platforms?
Napaka-importante yan sa aking plataforma kasi merong alternative economy na gusto kong i-push ekonomiya na nakabase sa produksyon. Basic state building lang naman ang kailangan natin sa Pilipinas. Kailangan natin i-improve ang ating agricultural production by, taking care of our farmers. Not of our hacienderos, because our hacienderos are simply a parasitic class hovering on top of the farmer, kinukuha ang wealth ng farmer. Alisin natin yung useless layer na yan at bigay natin ang lupa sa mga magsasaka kasi sila ang produktibong sektor. And then, suportahan mo ang mga magsasaka, i-subsidize mo sila, gastusan mo sila, just like what is happening in other countries like for example in Thailand and Vietnam, kung saan todo ang suporta ng gobyerno sa mga magsasaka. Hindi nila kailangan maging poor. Makakapag-produce sila ng pagkain at makapag-produce sila ng raw materials na pwedeng iproseso ng ating industriya. And then through our agricultural production, made through modern means, done through modern means, pwede tayong magkaroon ng industrialization program to process the agricultural products and to process the food para magkaroon ng higher value chain ng ating mga pinoproduce. And from there, we could also create yung heavy industry, pagmamanufacture ng mga makinarya na kinakailangan sa the entire productive process. That is basically basic state building. Ekonomiya na nakatungtong sa produksyon, na tumataas ka sa value chain. Ang ekonomiya ng Pilipinas ay hindi ganon. Walang industrialization at pinapabayaan ng agricultural production. Tayo ngayon ay reliant on import sa food. Tayo ay number 1 na rice importer sa buong mundo. Tapos ini-import natin ang lahat ng ating mga pangangailangan. Tapos nagpapadala na lang tayo ng OFW sa ibang bansa. At yun ngayon ang nagiging base ng ating ekonomiya. Ang pera na nire-remit ng OFW. So yan ay isang ekonomiya na hindi masusustain. So therefore, we must build an alternative type of an economy, again, that is based on production and not based on yung remittance ng OFW or any other economic activity that is not based on production.
Let us now expand further on employment. So access to economic opportunities is still disparate between urban and rural areas. People are often compelled to travel great lengths to migrate from their communities to work at the nation's capital, which is in Metro Manila. What might you consider to be key factors to decentralize economic development, and how will you pursue this goal through your policy interventions?
Unang-una na dyan kasi may pagkakaiba-iba ng sahod. Bakit pupunta sa Maynila? Kasi dito 645 ang minimum wage. Sa probinsya, 300, 400, 500. Therefore, they flock to Manila in order to find work. Secondly, walang development ng agrikultura sa countryside. Pinapabayaan ng mga magsasaka, therefore our farmers can no longer produce, they cannot generate wealth for the provinces. Alam mo, agrikultura, yan mismo ang wealth ng probinsya. Kung pababayaan natin ang mga magsasaka dyan, again, I would say they are the productive forces. Di anong ekonomiya ng lugar na yan? Di wala kang oportunidad na makikreate sa isang lugar na walang produksyon, walang ekonomiyang gumagana except siguro OFW money. So again, I will go back to that comprehensive na plan which is to boost production by helping the productive sectors from the ground. Then money will be spread on the ground, and not only spread on the ground, that means all across the country. And wealth will not simply be concentrated on top. Imaginein mo if wealth is just concentrated dun sa mga ilang mga billionaires. Sabihin natin 20 billionaire yan, na nandyan ang more than 50% of the wealth being generated. Wala ka talagang ekonomiya na makikreate, walang opportunity na makikreate. Kasi sila lang may hawak ng pera at hindi umiikot ang pera, ang wealth sa baba. Walang productive activities na mangyayari, Walang flowering of productive operations na mangyayari. And it will affect the countryside as it will affect the cities.
With respect to that, one of the issues that Filipino workers deal with on a regular basis is traffic. Metro Manila and other urban centers in the Philippines suffer from chronic traffic congestion and long commute times. Such conditions are often cited in these areas economic losses and reduced productivity. What specific policies would you promote to modernize and expand mass transit systems such as the MRT, LRT, PNR, and Bus Rapid Transit or BRT networks? Additionally, how do you plan to ensure that provincial cities and rural areas also benefit from improved transportation infrastructure and not just Metro Manila?
Unang-unang kailangan natin, again, ang efficient mass public transportation system run on renewable energy. Yan ang kailangan natin. Any modern country ay merong ganyan. Or modern city, merong ganyan. Pumunta ka sa Hong Kong, lahat, mayaman o mahirap, ay gumagamit ng kanilang mga tren. Reliable ang tren na yon. Hindi siya siksikan, at mas maraming mga wagons ang mga dumarating. Maraming tren ang dumarating on time. Kailangan meron tayong ganyan. And we cannot do that if it is not publicly financed. That's the second point. In order to create an efficient mass public transportation system, kailangan we should rely on the government to do that because the government has the power to mobilize the type of resources that is needed in order to build an efficient mass public transportation system, which again, I would emphasize, must be run on renewable energy. Kapag nagawa natin yan, makukonekta natin ang ilang points sa cities, diba? Ang lahat ng mga importanteng mga destination points sa cities, and at the same time, we could connect the cities and the countryside just like any other modern state. We cannot allow na itong mass public transportation system na ito ay simpleng i-bid out mo sa mga private corporation kasi ang mga private corporation hindi nila interest na gumawa ng transport system na epesyente na makikinabang ang karamihan. Ang kanilang interest, yung kanilang gagastusin merong matinding return on profit and it will limit the scope nung maaabot mo in terms of mass public transportation system.
We are now on our final round of questions which are on the topic of governance and partnerships. How is good governance and citizens' collaboration emphasized in your campaign platforms?
Well, in my campaign platform, I want to abolish all political dynasties. Ang mga dynastiya, yan ang responsible sa bad governance. Because the political dynasties are there not in order to do public service. They are there in order to advance their economic interests. Their control over what I will term as non-productive ways of creating wealth. They are in power not because they want to serve, but because they want to ensure in a recurring way yung kanilang mode of accumulating wealth which comes from, number one, outright corruption of our public funds. Number two, extraction, mining activities, for instance. Number three, privatization of our public services. Number four, outright crime. Okay? And number five, dispossession, because they do land grabbing. Every political dynasty that you will know, undertakes all of these things in order to accumulate wealth. And they are in power because they want to ensure the recurring way of creating wealth through this non-productive means of creating wealth. Therefore, if we abolish all political dynasties, for example, in passing an anti-dynasty law, we solve the problem of bad governance on the one hand, and on the other, we solve the problem of exploitation and abuse of our people. We put a stop to these exploitative practices, which affects our urban poor communities, which affects our farmers, which affects our indigenous people, which affects our urban poor.
Thank you for talking about your plans on good governance. Now let's go more in depth. The previous Duterte administration has been hostile towards political dissent, and the current Marcos administration has seen expansions of Duterte-era agencies such as the National Task Force to End Local Communism and Armed Conflict, or the NTF-LCAC. Such agencies have increasingly subjected individuals and organizations to harassment and political persecution. If elected, how would you ensure the protection of the political freedoms to peaceful assemblies and protests?
Kasi tanggalin natin yung mga ahensyang yan. Wala namang silbi yan eh. NTF-LCAC. Kailangan na rin i-withdraw yung Operation Double Barrel ni Duterte. All Duterte-era policies and legislation. Kailangan na rin natin siguro i-criminalize ang red tagging. Kailangan nating i-repeal ang anti-terror law. All draconian laws that have their origins in the time of Duterte, kailangan nang i-reverse. Kung gusto talaga natin mapuksa ang Dutertismo at gusto nating ma-address yung naging injustice dyan in terms of extrajudicial killings, we have to uproot yung mga policies and laws that have allowed the Duterte administration to act with impunity.
Now, on the topic of politics, corruption and inefficiency in government agencies have long been obstacles to the proper allocation of public funds, particularly those meant for essential services in healthcare, education, and agriculture. Funds intended to support social programs are often thought to be misused or otherwise lost to corruption due to the lower quality of these programs compared to what their allocated budgets might allow. If elected, what mechanisms would you implement to improve transparency in our government and ensure that every peso allocated for social services and agriculture support directly benefits the intended recipients?
Siyempre, kailangan natin ng parang, dapat yan, oversight function yan eh. Di ba? Kailangan muna, pagka gumawa ka ng budget, evaluate mo yung project na yan. Kailangan i-evaluate mo from the time na pinopropose yan, kung ano ba in substance yan. Halimbawa, yan ba ay yung dating nagkaroon ng problem, yung sa PDAP scam, na simpleng, alam mo yun, mga NGO ang binibigyan ng pera, tapos paper deliveries ang pinapalaganap, na wala namang nadi-deliver na whatever, na mga services. Dapat yan, dun pa lang sa budget preparation, ay vini-verify mo na, vini-vet mo na. Secondly, pagdating sa implementation, dapat mong meron kang oversight na ginagawa. Kung yan ba i-implement ba yan ng tama. And then thirdly, kailangan mong i-audit ang pera. All of these things must be done pag sa usapin ng mga budget.
Thank you for that. And that concludes our interview with Luke Espiritu. Thank you once again for sitting down with us as we discuss the pressing sectoral issues concerning the youth and the whole nation. This is Denya Agustin, Broadcast News, The Guidon. This has been Forward 2025, The Guidon's flagship coverage of the 2025 senatorial elections. Once again, I am Denya Agustin from The Guidon, and on behalf of the Forward team, we thank you for tuning in. With one vote, you can carry your cause forward. So, make it count.